Hi, Leanne Donahue-Tamplin here. I heard recently on the news in Australia that a judge listening to a domestic violence court case, when the victim didn't press charges or hadn't turned up to the hearing again, he commented that, well, I guess she's entitled to choose to continue to be beaten up, isn't she? There was some uproar about that in the media, and that he was heard to be criticising a victim of domestic violence and how inappropriate that was. I suppose for me, though, the real problem is much bigger than that. So it's not that just that he could criticise someone who'd experienced domestic violence. It's that the legal system doesn't understand the nature of a domestic violence relationship. And I actually think the term domestic violence isn't necessarily the right term. I think it sounds like it's talking about incidents of only physical violence, when in fact I think it's much more of a domestic abuse is a better term to be used, because there isn't always physical violence, but there is always emotional, verbal abuse, other types of abuse, controlling, financial control of someone else. So there's a lot of different things that could be come underneath that banner of domestic abuse. So I don't know that the term domestic violence is really the right one. We have in these situations an abusive relationship. So what happens in those types of abusive relationships, whether there is physical violence or not, is that the victim is trained or groomed into blaming themselves for the abuse, keeping the secret of the abuse, being fearful of the repercussions of talking out about the abuse or of acting in any way that the perpetrator doesn't agree with. They're living in a constant state of fear and anxiety. And so it's not just there are episodes of violence and that someone may be choosing to be beaten. It is that they don't have a choice. So the reason so many victims of domestic violence stay and don't speak out about what's going on in their relationship or don't get out of those relationships is because they are trained into thinking that it's normal, that they deserve it, that no one else will have them, that they can't survive on their own, that if they speak out about it, that their life will be in danger, or their family's lives, or their children's lives. Sometimes and frequently, they love the perpetrator. They've had a long-standing relationship with the perpetrator. And so when this person isn't being abusive, they're actually being fabulous. So they don't want to hurt them. If they could escape without hurting them, they would probably do that. But they don't know how to do that. So it's a very complicated, challenging situation for women to be in, and not one that an offhanded comment that doesn't take into account any of that context is appropriate for. What's terrifying, what's most terrifying about that is one of the few places that women living with domestic violence can go to for help is the legal system. Clearly, they don't get it. So I hear that so often from my clients that are fighting in court, to even after they've had the courage to leave the relationship, to minimise the impact of the perpetrator on their children during access visits. It's rarely heard appropriately or rarely addressed appropriately in the courts. There is bullying, harassment that continues after they've left. Nobody's protecting them. Our legal system really fails women who've escaped or who are living with domestic violence. I've heard that police really struggle with domestic violence cases because so many women who initially, have been beaten or there's evidence of the violence will withdraw their charges rather than go ahead. So I've worked with women in that place, trying to make that decision, with the perpetrator manipulating them so that they won't. Promise I won't do it again. Come on, honey, I'm gonna lose my job. How am I gonna keep the house if we do that? The only way that we can survive is if you withdraw that charge against me. You know I won't do it again. It was an accident. You provoked me. You said the wrong thing. If you don't do that, it'll never happen again. I've sat with them while they're going through this process of, but I know he's done it before. How am I going to get out of this situation? But I really don't want to hurt him. I don't know what to do. His family won't speak to me. I can't do this on my own with the kids. They're caught in this horrific situation of manipulation from the perpetrator on the back of years of emotional abuse, trying to make this hugely significant decision with a court that thinks, well, they can choose to continue to be beaten if they want to, I guess, can't they? And I wish that was the only judge that believed that. So I suppose I'm less concerned about the fact that a judge was heard to say that, and more concerned that our legal systems, both here and overseas, don't understand the full abusive context that's going on in these types of relationships. And without that understanding, they really can't make quality decisions about where to from here for each family. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. Thanks for listening, and talk to you again soon.